It's day two, and after a good night's sleep, I'm settling into Paris. And today I thought I'd share a little bit about what this journey is about, why I'm here, and what brought me here, and to the best of my ability, what I think will come out of it. I was in a corporate career for many, many years. I spent 10 or 15 years in leadership, in senior leadership. I've had those executive roles with more than 2,000 people reporting to me and hundreds of millions of dollars in budget. So when I talk about my experience, I get it. If you're a senior leader, I have walked that path. I did a master's in leadership, so it is an area that I'm passionate about, and it certainly wasn't an area that I planned to fully walk away from. I am and will always consider myself a leader. I think I just had to redefine what that looked like for me. I was in a space of looking for that next role, looking for that next progression in my career, and also starting some work. I had had a coach for a while, an executive coach that was provided to me by the organization, as well as starting to work with a somatic practitioner. And as we started doing that work together, I started to have to accept the realization that while I had a title and a role, and I was probably making more money than I ever dreamed I would make, ultimately I wasn't happy. And as much as I could have spent another 10 or 15 years waiting to get my full pension, as many of my colleagues were doing, I realized that that was just 10 years too many, that the call towards more fullness, more joy, more meaning in my life was really missing. And so that set me on a journey, and it wasn't the quickest journey either. I would say, I really spent 6 to 9 months just accepting where I was, accepting that I was very good at rationalizing and analyzing and on paper deciding the reasons why my life was the way that it was. But I also remember moments with my somatic practitioner when she would say, as you say that statement, as you talk about your work success or your work goals or what it is that you want and what it is that you're doing, what do you notice in your body? And over time, what I began to discover was I didn't actually believe the words that I was telling her. They were coming from a very distanced, analytical, rational place. And somatic work was very new for me. I would say I grew up and have always lived in a realm that was far more logical than it was emotional. I don't know that I really built a full understanding of my emotions and had a relationship with my emotions and understanding what they wanted and they needed. And it was through the really important somatic work, which to me was very gentle, was very self-exploratory. There was no deep moments of crisis or falling apart before I could come back together. It was simply noticing my body, and I would say over time, and now a very strong proponent of the wisdom of the body, that gut instincts are only the beginning of some of that wisdom. And more I had to learn to trust it, and it has become a bigger part of my life. And now I think I can balance quite well a logical and a somatic intelligence together. So really spending some time just realizing that change needed to happen, but resistant to that change. And I think that's perfectly natural. I think that is a journey that so many of us take, that we become aware of a problem, but solving that problem, dealing with that problem feels bigger or more demanding than we might feel ready for. And so I sat with it for 6 to 9 months. I knew one of the anchor points for me was very much that I had a level of financial security, and that was really important to me, and that felt close to my core values, and it wasn't something that I wanted to disturb. I was more than ready to open up to the idea of a different career, of a different life, but not if that meant sacrificing the financial stability and security that I had, that I'd worked really, really hard to get in my life. But eventually, the seed started. I could start to see and envision what it might look like to move into a consulting space, to understand the experience that I'd had, the senior leadership, working across systems. I had done the hard work of running a couple of hospitals and care facilities across the pandemic. So I had been tested as a leader and felt confident in the skills and experience that I had. But I think for many of us, taking the leap to looking for, or perhaps marketing ourselves, selling ourselves as the product, rather than simply being accepted or being welcomed into a different organization, is a real change of mindset. It took me some time. And I followed the advice of one of the authors that I was reading, which was pick your date and put it on the mirror. And I had done that. And my date was actually a full year out. It was about a year and 2 weeks out. And for the first probably 4 or 5 months, it was more of a concept than it was a decision. It was moving towards something that I didn't fully know that I would go through with. I had the intention of it, I had the wish of it, but I still wasn't fully sure that that was the direction that I wanted to go. It still felt like jumping off of a cliff to some degree. On the really bad days, I could take relief in the idea of knowing that when I hit this point in the year next year, I wouldn't be there and I wouldn't have to deal with this problem. Or in really bad meetings or internal politics or just leadership places that I disagreed with, I could take comfort in knowing that I was stepping away. And even in and of itself, I think there was some value of not having that same attachment to my role, not having that same attachment to having an opinion about every decision that gets made in the organization, whether I would have made a decision that was different if I was in a CEO position or if I was in a different position that I was. I certainly had my own vision for the organization, and it didn't always align with that of the leaders. And there were times when I would get frustrated or simply feel they were missing things despite trying to share some of my ideas, some of my concepts. It felt like it was a large and unwieldy organization, quite bureaucratic at times. And I think that's natural in any organization that's large. And slowly across that year, I think the momentum built. It became more and more real. It became more and more tangible. And I think for me, kind of that tipping point came when I was able to look at my bank account and realize that through some focused savings, I had really hit that cushion of 6 months. And that if I was to leave the organization, I now felt enough financial security that I could figure out what came next. I had confidence in the consulting market, and though it would be a few more months before I left, that was the first piece that started to make it real. And it was a long journey in which really nobody knew this was the decision that I was making, other than continuing to work with my coach and my somatic practitioner, maybe a few chosen friends. But by and large, certainly none of my coworkers knew that I had intention to leave. My boss didn't know I had intention to leave. None of my colleagues knew I had intention to leave. And it simply became my own journey and my own decision point. And at 6 months, I started to feel that confidence. It started to feel real enough that it could happen, that I could walk away from the title and the role and the salary, and that everything would be okay, and that I believed in that possibility. I believed in that possibility more than the possibility of staying, because staying drained so much of my energy, so much of my passion, and simply I think I had hit the point where staying wasn't an option. Staying another 10 years within that particular system, even in a different employer, was not going to bring me what I needed out of my life. And these are those big turning points in our lives, and they're processes. They don't always happen overnight. Sometimes the realization happens overnight, but sometimes the actions associated with them don't happen overnight. But at the same time, my fear was I didn't want to be in a place of resentment, in a place of knowing I needed different or wanted different, but not having the courage to make that decision to do different. And I think I've seen shades of that in other individuals where they simply become bitter and jaded over time, and there is a inherent anger that sits there that they are wanting to change their circumstances, but those barriers, those psychological barriers in their way, are too much for them. It is too much to consider that risk. They're not able to get past their own version of financial security or whatever it is for them that means letting go of the certain and walking into the uncertain. And I think this is so much a part of everybody's life in their 40s and 50s, is that we work really, really hard. We establish a particular path, a particular lifestyle. We have followed the map that's been given to us of what success looks like, what we are to be striving for, where we know we have been successful. And we often come to realize that it is based on external achievements. It is based on things and material objects and things that don't bring us the joy or the satisfaction or the hope or the sense of meaning that we hope that we would find in our lives. I think there's a lot of disorientation and renegotiation that needs to happen in these decades where we were following one particular map and now we have to question whether it was worth it. And there can be frustration, there can be disappointment, there can be anger that we did what we were told to do on some societal, cultural level, and what we were promised, what the billions of dollars of advertising aimed at us were supposed to promise us, the level of bliss and satisfaction, simply aren't there. And on paper, we may look very successful. We may have a whole lot of others who want to live our lives, and yet when we sit and are quiet with ourselves, we realize not doing it for us. At least that was my experience. I hit a point where status quo was not going to be okay, was not going to move forward, and as terrifying as it was, some part of me knew, some part of me had to move forward. And so I continued to move forward. I hit the 9-month period. I saw that runway increase for myself. I saw and felt more confident in that cushion, that it would take some time perhaps to figure out how the pieces were going to fall when I left that role. And yet the readiness was increasing, and perhaps it was simply sitting with the idea long enough that I could feel confident in it, that I had worked through different scenarios. And though there were certainly no guarantees in where I was moving forward, there was enough momentum and there was enough desire for different that slowly I was hitting that point of no return, of moving and leaving a role and figuring out what was on the other side. That then came to the pieces where it was time to share out that news, to share with my boss, to colleagues, to those that report to me, that I had made a decision to leave. And that forced me to confront shadow doubts that were there, because you're now trying to explain something that others may have opinion on. Others surely have opinions and judgments on. And it forced me to stay in a place. At times, I was not perfect at it by any means, but be in a place of believing in myself, believing in my own path, and choosing a journey that others may not understand, that choosing a path I found that triggered insecurity in others because I was realizing some of their worst fears about not knowing what came next, about not having certain securities or familiarities, and hearing from others around being brave, being courageous, doing what they wished they could do but didn't feel like they could. And I didn't feel particularly brave or courageous, but over time I've hoped that I've been able to at least stand as a model that it can be done. I don't know that I can label myself as wildly successful in that journey, but I can label myself as somebody who is willing to step out of the familiar, to step out of the career ladder, the dream that is sold as what we're supposed to achieve in our careers. And I was very, very fortunate in that in my last month of employment there, I was able to get in touch with a former colleague, pick up some consulting work, and have been able to carry on a lot of that consulting work in a part-time way. And I've had a couple of what we would call digital nomad experiences, if we're still allowed to have those over 40, I think we are. I spent a month in a different part of the country not too long after I left, and I think that was a good opportunity to just let go of that previous life, let go of that career space, to rest a little, to find balance a little bit more, and to start to do things that were more meaningful for me. About 2 or 3 months after that, in the dead of winter, I chose to spend 5 weeks in Mexico City, which I absolutely loved. And again, I think that was an experience of both learning to have a regular routine to be able to still work, but be in a place where I wanted to do things, where I wanted to explore, where I wanted to experience different elements of culture. And that's continued to build. And that is why I find myself today in Paris, spending an entire month ahead, and unsure of exactly what it means, but I've always loved Europe. I probably feel more at home in Europe than I do in North America. There's something about the values and the rhythm of life here, the prioritizing and the value placed on arts and culture and craftsmanship and detail, and those are all really important parts for me. So this is an experiment of some, perhaps. It is to live a European life for a month and discover perhaps I want to be here more. Perhaps I want to spend a whole lot more time here. Perhaps there's something to be learned in the rhythm and the values and what it means to be European. I think overall, the short answer why I'm here is because I feel drawn to be here. It feels like a dream come true to live a month in Paris. How many years would I have wished for this sort of thing to happen, but settled for 2 weeks of vacation with an overbooked itinerary, flying overseas and trying to soak up as much Europe as I can, and almost coming back more exhausted because I really tried to dig in and see every bit that I could. And so I'll have space here. I am not planning to overbook myself. Certainly I want to take advantage of being here and see all that I can see here, but I also want the space to reflect, to learn about myself, to understand what comes next, and to share this journey openly. I think, if there's anything that I've learned in this journey as well, it's that plenty of people struggle through it. Plenty of people are in that place of feeling unhappy in their lives, but unsure where to go. So again, I share not as a model to be held up, not as a particular solution, but as my own experience. And it is every bit a project for me, and if you can find value out of it, then all the better, and that's partly why I'm sharing it. It's an ability to come into my life in a really honest place and to share openly without fear of what others might think, of how others might judge me. And so starts the journey. So starts a month in Paris, and what will come out of it, I have no idea. But I'm looking forward to sharing all of the adventures. There will probably be some ups and downs. There'll probably be some amazing moments of both feeling incredibly soul-inspired by some of the amazing pieces of culture and venues that I can attend here. And I also hope that there's plenty in the quiet moments, in walking through a park or sitting in a cafe and just really enjoying being in the moment. And that's just as important to me when I'm here. It's breaking out of the routine. It is being a stranger in a strange land, and yet trying to find all of the value in that. So maybe I'll wrap up there and let the adventure begin. At least you know a little bit more about me and why I'm on this adventure now. We'll see you for day 3 tomorrow, and see what happens. Thank you for watching.